Happy Tuesday, everybody. We come to you live here on the DK Nation, DK Live Twitter pages, YouTube, and Twitch, the DraftKings channel. Brendan Glasheen, Gary and Thorne in tonight for Shirag Hira, and Matt Meiselman joins the show. We call the Slate. We cover all things DFS and DraftKings Sportsbook for the next hour or so. Tonight, we'll take you up until 5:55, and we are focusing most of our attention tonight, most likely all of it, take a little break from the Tom Brady retirement news and this really juicy day of NFL stuff. You can look at that in a variety of ways, but we're going to give you an NFL breather and go to the NBA. 7 games tonight in the NBA, lots and lots of injury news to get to. Some of it we won't be able to give you the full scoop on because it does not really relate until later in the night, but we'll do our best to cycle through most of tonight's action. 7 games on the slate. Garion, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Thanks for hopping on tonight.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Very interesting slate. I mean, really just an interesting week in the NBA. Kind of a week we haven't seen in some time, just with so many of those postponed games getting rescheduled for this like 10-day span. We're kind of seeing some unprecedented stuff for this season at the very least, just, having 7 Tuesday games and that leading into a full Wednesday slate, coming off of a big Monday slate, a big Sunday slate. Like, you've got a couple teams who are playing 2 sets of back-to-backs this week alone. So, nights where we're going to have suddenly Steph Curry out at 2:30. This kind of stuff with the schedule as compressed as it has been and needs to be this particular week. I mean, it really is just a very interesting NBA slate that I don't think we're going to see a lot of going forward this season.
We will not have, or there's a possibility we won't have Nikola Jokic tonight as well. Bradley Beal is out. He's going to be out for a bit. We're finding out James Harden will be probable tonight. There's a lot here, Matt Meiselman. There's a lot. And to make the transition, this is all very relevant to how lines might move tonight over on the DK Sportsbook.
Yeah, we have a ton of line movement for today. Some of it has already happened. Some of it is ongoing. Some of it hasn't even started yet, but we're going to see it at some point. The big news so far that we know for sure is that Steph Curry is not playing. And to be honest, I was shocked that Steve Kerr didn't announce that he was going to be out last night in the post-game press conference. Like, I was convinced that they were going to say it because the Warriors got the win. I was watching the game in the fourth quarter. Like, Curry looked drained and he played really well. Like, it seemed like the perfect excuse to say, all right, we got out of there with a win in Houston. The game was a little iffy for a while. Curry scored 40 points, got himself back on track, and got a little beat up in the process. We'll just give him off tomorrow. But they spent the whole post-game press conference just talking about how good Curry was, especially in the fourth quarter. So because of that, we actually got the betting line up before the announcement. Sometimes what happens is the coach goes right to the podium after the game, gives the rest announcement, and no one gets a chance to bet the game because the line's not posted yet. So the line came out after that, and the Spurs were 3-point underdogs, which I thought was too high of a line, even with Steph playing, because the back-to-back I just think is a big deal. We already knew Klay Thompson wasn't going to be playing because he's not playing back-to-backs right now at any point, and we already obviously know Draymond Green's out. He's been out for a while. So I was ready to bet the Spurs anyway. And then we got this Curry news, Wiggins, Otto Porter Jr., who didn't even play yesterday, which that was the most surprising part of this. Otto Porter Jr. was out for rest yesterday, and now he's out for rest again. And he's an important player, especially when guys like Wiggins and Curry aren't there. So now it's going to be the Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga show, and the Spurs are up to 5-point favorites. And to be honest, like, I still think the line's too low. I think the Spurs should be favored by, let's say, 6, 7, maybe 8 points. I think somewhere in that range. It's close, but I still think the line should move a little bit more. Unclear if it will or not, but yeah, that's the big line movement so far. And then we've got Jokic obviously coming up soon, and that's going to change some things also.
And this season, San Antonio has been a good home team, especially when it's favored. 8-3 against the spread this season when playing at home. That's one of the best marks in the NBA, and I've got the DFS contest pulled up right now because of the white and red outline of out. So that is, yes, very, very loaded sheet as far as guys that are out for tonight for Golden State. So yeah, this makes for a very interesting discussion throughout the course of the night and how to approach the slate. So Meiselman, just to kind of hop back off you here, and then we'll get Garion's thoughts. What kind of should we expect more movement as the night goes along? Like, what else can change here for this game? Is it going to stay at 5 because there might be too much action on the Spurs and maybe you end up getting a better number with Golden State on the other end of it?
I don't think it's likely to move enough where I would be interested in the Warriors. This is actually not the same as yesterday. We talked a little bit about the Sixers Grizzlies game yesterday at the end of our football show.
You were on it, pal. You were on it.
So I was a little surprised that the Sixers actually did win, but I wasn't surprised the game was close because that one I thought overcorrected where Embiid got ruled out. But I think the line in that case moved too far. I don't feel that way about this one. I do think the Spurs still are a semi-decent bet here at -5. So unless the line got to a number with a 7 or an 8 in it, I think you lay off of it as far as betting the Warriors unless you see that. And that just seems very unlikely, right? Like Curry's been out now for over 2.5 hours. I think that most of the line movement that's going to happen probably has already happened. So the game for sure where we're going to see the most line movement, regardless of the update, is with the Denver and Minnesota game because we still don't know if Jokic is playing or not.
Right. Gary, and you have a thought on that game as far as how the line might move throughout the day? I think I saw some updates earlier this afternoon too. So D'Angelo Russell, Patrick Beverley, they're also questionable for this game tonight as well.
Well, that's changed. So D'Angelo Russell is now doubtful. Patrick Beverley is probable. So you're at least going to have one competent point guard for the Minnesota Timberwolves. I like Jordan McLaughlin too. Yeah, no, it's obviously the Jokic news is what everyone's waiting for with that particular game. And we've talked about this quite a bit, both in the DFS capacity and the betting capacity. Just there's no player as important to a team as Nikola Jokic is the Denver Nuggets. I mean, he's the singularity of their offense. One of the reasons he's such a great DFS asset is he is unlike so many superstars who sometimes you have to worry about game script, where the dirty little secret with the Nuggets is they're so bad when Jokic isn't on the court that he's never a risk to play in a blowout, because for the 10 minutes he rests every single night, the Nuggets have been outscored by 12 points. So that's why he has to play these crazy games against like the Pistons. Twice that happened in the past 2 weeks. So yeah, I think that right now with Minnesota, obviously one of the hotter teams in the NBA, some defensive question marks in their own right, but I could see this line probably getting to what, -8, 8.5, maybe even 9 if Jokic doesn't play. And I would still maybe be tempted to take Minnesota just because I have so little faith in what's left of the Nuggets if Jokic is not playing.
Okay, Meiselman, you care to weigh in on the spread here and how it could change?
I'm a little blown away because Garion said almost exactly what I was going to say. So that's very easy for me because I can just completely agree with that. Yeah, I think on both fronts, that's pretty sharp analysis. Like we're going to see the line get to 8 or 9, and I think it deserves to be well into the double digits if Jokic doesn't play. The thing to add, well, first of all, if Jokic does play, I think we see the line get down from where it's at now, which is at 4 to about 2. I think that the odds makers are cautiously optimistic that Jokic will play. I actually have a little bit of a disagreement with that because just the way the schedule shapes up, Denver plays in Utah tomorrow, and the Nuggets have made this incredible run, mostly fueled by how poorly the Jazz have played recently, to get within a game and a half, depending on how you view the tiebreaker, which the Jazz do have locked up head-to-head. But either way, they've gotten themselves into the division race. And even though Minnesota is also technically in the division race, they're a bit further back. This is a big deal for tomorrow if Denver can beat Utah and potentially actually take over first place in the division. So if you ask the Nuggets which game is more important, tonight or tomorrow, I think it's tomorrow. Now, Jokic could play both games. He could play tonight and, depending how tonight goes, decide to play or not play tomorrow based on how he feels. But I think that there's a better chance that odds makers are giving you credit for that he decides to just take tonight off and they save him for tomorrow for the bigger game. So I'm leaning towards him not playing, but I do think it's fairly close to 50-50. But let's say he doesn't play. The other thing that's kind of a big deal here is DeMarcus Cousins is questionable. He's now the Nuggets backup center. And I think Cousins is actually somewhat important. Not if Jokic plays, because then Cousins is playing 12 minutes or something. It's just not that big of a deal. But if Jokic is out, Cousins would be the guy that the Nuggets would use at center. I think he's still a decent player at this point in his career. And if he's not playing, then you have Zeke Naji playing center or JaMychal Green. Like these guys aren't good. In the past, it might have been Bol, but now, he's in Boston. Can't have him here. Like there's not a lot of size, and Denver's going up against Karl Anthony Towns. So that matchup, if JaMychal Green, Jeff Green, and Zeke Naji are the only active centers for this team, that's a pretty big problem for Denver. And I think in that case where you get Jokic and Cousins both out, this line deserves to be like 13 or something. And it's only at 4 right now. Like we could see a nearly 10-point move if both of these centers get ruled out. On the flip side, though, just looking at the DFS price, if Jokic is out and Cousins is in, he's 3,400. So maybe that's a good way to segue into DFS because Cousins is arguably the best value play on the slate if he's in and starting at center and Jokic is not playing.
Or to your point, maybe you do consider Cat with a favorable matchup with no Jokic if indeed he does get ruled out. And just another note on your scheduling point. So tonight, the Nuggets are in Minnesota. Then they've got the Jazz, as you mentioned. And then they've got a easy, I say easy in air quotes, because if he doesn't play, then it changes their whole team. But they play the New Orleans Pelicans on Friday. Then they go play 5 straight against the Eastern Conference. So these conference games, divisional games are crucial, as we know, as it pertains to seeding and working your way up the Western Conference. But as Meiselman said, they've made a pretty fantastic run. 6 of their last 7, the Nuggets have won. So we go to DFS, and maybe we can spend time on Cat if he's worth mentioning. I guess Gary, and maybe Cat becomes chalky if indeed Jokic gets ruled out and just it's too obvious to play Cat.
I mean, it's an interesting conversation just because I don't think Towns has been looked upon this season as someone who I'd say is like a layup every night, considering his price point. I mean, he's had good nights, he's had bad nights, but I think the knock on Karl Anthony Towns for, I would say, the last 3.5 seasons in Minnesota is he's the rare superstar who doesn't quite get the superstar volume within his own offense. I mean, we're constantly asking Minnesota to give Karl Anthony Towns more shots. And, obviously someone like Anthony Edwards coming into the mix and being as good and showing as much offensive promise as he has does not help that case. I would say D'Angelo Russell not playing would probably help Karl Anthony Towns' overall usage rate in this particular game. But you're probably going to go into a scenario tonight in DFS where the popular strategy in building a lineup, not necessarily putting names on these things yet, is find 4 or 5 guys below 4K who are going to be playing upwards of 30 minutes at a high usage because there's just so many superstars missing on tonight's slate. And then pick your 3 favorite studs. And that's kind of how the lineups are going to be able to be built. And I don't know. I don't know if Towns necessarily becomes one of my favorite studs, if I'm being honest. I mean, he's $9,800. As I said, he's someone who's kind of lived between 40 and 45 DraftKings points this season more often than he's gotten above 50. I would have serious concerns, as Matt and I just talked about the just game script of this particular matchup. If Jokic is not playing, yes, Towns could have an amazing 27 minutes, 28 minutes, but I could see this being a Minnesota Timberwolves blowout. I could see Towns not having to play the fourth quarter. So when I look at just some of the other like quote unquote studs on this slate, I don't know. I think I'm more enticed by, even someone like a Jimmy Butler, who got the night off last night, has fresh legs. We've talked a lot in recent weeks about just pick your favorite Raptor because they're going to play 40 minutes, even if it's on the second night of a back-to-back. So like someone like Pascal Siakam, honestly, is a little bit more enticing to me than Karl Anthony Towns, even in a very difficult matchup against the Heat. I just don't think Towns like cracks my top 3 if I'm looking to rank my studs tonight, if I'm being honest.
Gary and Thorne has a write-up right now on the DK Playbook, fantasy basketball picks. He's got top studs and value plays. So if you want more, I mean, we can certainly discuss it. It's not a secret. He's already kind of done so.
Although I will say that was from last night and a lot has changed.
True. I see. Posted time, 1:05 a.m.
But yeah.
Yeah, if you see 6 Warriors in Gary's lineup and he didn't mention any of them last night, it's because, the situation is a little different now.
That guy sucks. He doesn't know what he's talking about. No, the article was posted at 1:05 in the morning. So.
But I think the Warriors are very interesting because, Matt was saying as we were doing our little pre-production meeting, like you could realistically go through their entire lineup right now and peg 5 or 6 different guys as almost shoo-ins to hit 5x value, maybe even go off for 6, 7x value. So it's one of those rare cases where even if you pick the right warrior, are you picking enough of them? Are you picking, even if you pick a guy who comes out with 6x value, his teammate might have 8x value. So I don't know. I think with the Warriors, the one guy I'm really drawn to is probably Moses Moody, who's at the absolute minimum at 3K. Got the start last night against Houston, played 24 minutes. I feel like Jordan Poole, I don't know why I'm so scared of him. I just feel like I know his usage rate is going to be 30 to 35% tonight, and that's fantastic. But, again, there's the risk of blowout potential here, and I think we could see a situation where Poole's not going to have to play the fourth quarter, and someone like Moody, who's been really struggling to get minutes so far this season and would obviously be in a situation where Kerr would want to, get him as many NBA minutes as possible, just get something on tape. I think he could play in a blowout, even if he does end up starting this game. And also, I think it's a little underrated that DeJounte Murray is just an excellent one-on-one defender. And I think Poole would be dealing with a lot of DeJounte Murray throughout this game, or at least I think their minutes would overlap pretty heavily. So I don't want to say that Poole isn't viable because that sounds crazy considering who's not playing for the Warriors tonight. But I think I'd rather really cherry pick the 3K guys than maybe aggressively pursue Jordan Poole on this slate. And I don't know if that's going to end up making me look like an absolute fool, but it's where I'm leaning right now.
Well, Matt, Poole to Gary, Poole's going to be very popular because of the obvious out signals and all these guys. He's the one guy that sits up there at $5,500.
Yeah, I feel a little bit differently. I think Poole's fadeable for the ownership, but as far as value for his price, it's almost a can't miss spot. I think the reason for Gary's skepticism and maybe skepticism of other people is the way that Jordan Poole performed the last time Steph Curry didn't play. Against the Pelicans, he was pretty awful in what was just a disastrously low scoring game.
Before you keep going, you know how I know that? Because a good friend of ours, Julian Edlow, may or may not have had his points prop, and he did not get there close. So I got a laugh out of it.
I spoke to Julian this afternoon trying to convince him that Poole was still good today, even though that had happened. So this is maybe my reference point for why people are scared of Poole. But the difference between these two games is that Andrew Wiggins played in the New Orleans game. And so I'm pretty sure Otto Porter did also. Like, they have so much less for tonight in San Antonio than they did for that prior game in New Orleans where Poole let everyone down. So, like, the guys that are going to be playing for the Warriors tonight are very low usage players. I love Gary Payton II probably more than any basketball fan. I think he's one of the best defensive players in the NBA, but he's going to stand in the corner on offense. And Kuminga is a little higher volume, but same kind of thing. Like, Poole is out there with guys who don't score. Kevon Looney basically is going to try to replicate what Draymond Green does, setting screens and trying to get people open and rolling to the basket. Like, they're not running any plays for him. So for the minutes while Poole is on the court, there's no one else really to take a lot of shots. So even at 21.5 points, which is about 5 points higher than what his line was before Curry got ruled out, I still think that number's too low. Like, Poole should realistically score in the mid to high 20s. I would just reiterate
quickly. Like, I don't think Jordan Poole's a bad play. I just think we are in a situation where, like I said, every Warrior who is active tonight is a good play.
Yeah.
So
no, fair enough.
I think, yes, I would be much more comfortable, as you were saying, attacking him from a props perspective, where I think he's probably going to take, I would say somewhere in the realm of like 23 to 25 field goal attempts per 36 minutes. I do just worry slightly that if this game even gets remotely out of hand, considering especially, I would say Steve Kerr and the Warriors have shown this season that they will be more aggressive about resting players than virtually any team. I think that's what we're seeing tonight essentially is, you were saying that it was surprising to see Otto Porter get ruled out for rest for a second consecutive night. I don't think so. I think what the Warriors have shown so far this season is when they are tanking a game, they are unabashedly tanking a game. And I think it's, again, Poole's going to start. He's going to play heavy minutes. But I think if this script gets out of hand, I'm just saying I wouldn't be shocked if this game finishes up and the Warriors have lost by 21 and Jordan Poole played 27 minutes.
Yeah. There are a couple other reasons to me, too, why fading Poole makes sense. Number one is blowout potential with ownership, like that combination where people are relying on him and there could be a blowout. The other reason, though, is just how much value there might be on this slate. So let's say Jokic and Cousins don't play, or even if it's just Jokic, right? Because Cousins being out there, now you have Cousins as a value play. You also have, well, we already have Spencer Dinwiddie, 5,900, which is not that much more expensive than Poole because Beal is out. That's, points per dollar, probably not quite as good. But then we potentially have Will Barton and Aaron Gordon, who are in the same price range too. So it's not like there aren't pivots. Jordan Poole could go 7x tonight and not be in the winning lineup. Like, I think that's a real possibility. He could score, if he doesn't get to 40 fantasy points, he probably still makes the winning lineup. But like, there's a scenario where 6 or 7 guys that are 6K and underscore 40 plus fantasy points tonight. Yeah. That situation only really happens if Jokic sits, because I don't think there's enough firepower on the Warriors where that can all come from them. But if we get the Denver situation where Jokic is not playing and these other Denver guys manage to keep the game close, like if Cousins is good and Barton's good and Gordon's good, maybe Jeff Green, maybe Monty Morris, like there's a ton of players on that team that could just outperform Jordan Poole, even if he has a solid game. So yeah, I think I'm sort of on the same page there. The thing that makes this slate hard, really, and it's just unfortunate the way the times of the games break down, is that the Nuggets play before the Warriors, because if you were able to take your Jordan Poole stand first and then find out Jokic was sitting after, then you get really low ownership on Gordon and on Barton and potentially on Cousins. Now, as it stands, like we're going to find out about Jokic at least 40 minutes before you have to make your call on the Warriors. So that's just unfortunate scheduling wise. I think it takes away some of the edge from this slate, but you still will have people who lock in their lineups at 7 o'clock and don't adjust for the Jokic news. So the thing you want for sure is that we don't find out about Jokic until after lock, and then you can make swaps and maybe get off Poole and play Barton or Monty Morris, guys like that. Because even though the obvious pivot off Jokic is Cousins, Jokic is an entire offense by himself. Like, him not playing means that every single other player in the Nuggets starting lineup is much, much better from a fantasy perspective.
As Matt Meiselman once said, daily fantasy in the NBA is like a job. So you better be committed to your job tonight if you want the winning lineup with all this injury news. And the way the schedule staggers between 7 and 10 o'clock, Brooklyn Phoenix is the late national game, and then the Wizards play the Bucks. That's the first TNT game at 7:30. And right now, I just pulled up the log from that game on January 6th when Steph was out. Jordan Poole, only 14 shots in the game. He made 3 of them, and he went 2 for 9 from 3. 11 points. And his prop, as we mentioned, 21.5 is at plus 100 points prop on the DraftKings Sportsbook. What injury that we're monitoring? So we've got Steph, we've got Jokic. Also, and some of these injuries are more known, right? Durant, Beal, we've known these for a couple of days, some for a couple of weeks now. What injury maybe is being overlooked to find value, Gary, on tonight's slate?
It's an interesting question.
Thank you.
Let's see.
I mean, I'll help you out. I'll give you an example. Tonight, you like Kyrie Irving as a potential stud.
Well,
this
is a situation where a lot has changed in the last little bit. I mean, Kyrie.
Okay,
look,
like
I'm not
Kyrie
saying Kyrie's
Irving.
a bad play, because I do think you have a 2-pillar offense in Brooklyn, essentially. Like, if both guards are playing, it's a perfectly fine scenario where each is likely going to play somewhere between 36 to 40 minutes if it's a competitive game. But yeah, I think, look, I don't want to say Kyrie's not viable, because, without Durant in that lineup, you're probably still looking at a version of Kyrie that's got a usage rate above 30%. But obviously he was much more viable if James Harden was not going to sit. Although some of these sort of like tertiary value people might have thought they were going to be able to get with Brooklyn is another conversation that's kind of interesting. I think, you look at someone like James Johnson, who is probably still going to play a very big role for the Nets tonight, considering that they have no LaMarcus Aldridge. They haven't shown the most confidence in someone like Day'Ron Sharpe. He's kind of floated in and out of the lineup. I think Nick Claxton will probably play somewhere between 20 to 25 minutes tonight. But Johnson was someone who's played about 29 minutes a game across their last 3 games, and now no Aldridge. You'd have to think he's probably in line to play over 30 minutes tonight. They're just going to need his size on the interior. But the version of James Johnson where, you don't have James Harden and he's going to have to maybe take somewhere in the realm of like 10 to 12 shots is a lot different from the version of James Johnson where he is completely dependent on secondary statistics. I'm not saying he can't bring back value tonight. I still think he's in a reasonably good spot, but it is one of those situations where just having Harden and the way he impacts not only, scoring points, but also rebounding, it does dilute some of the value. To your initial question, though, maybe an injury we're just not completely exploring, and I would say not because it's not important, but because now it's just older news. Washington. I mean, Washington's a really interesting spot to dive for value tonight, just because we know that Bradley Beal is not going to play. We've known that the longest of almost all of these injuries tonight. And Milwaukee is a team that runs a very fast-paced offense. I mean, they've got the highest pace in the Eastern Conference across their last 10 games. So this is a spot where you could hypothetically see someone break out for Washington, aside from Spencer Dinwiddie, who I just think will be chalk, and that's fine. I think it's justifiable chalk. I mean, he's too cheap for what his role is going to be without Bradley Beal. But, you look at someone like I think Denny's in a pretty good spot. He's someone who over the last couple of weeks has sort of taken over a bit of a secondary playmaker role for this team. I think he can pass more than they give him the opportunity to. And without Beal, he's going to be asked to do a little bit more. I don't necessarily think he's going to start. They've kind of leaned towards Corey Kispert the last couple of times that Beal's missed games, but I still like Denny. And I think Thomas Bryant is also someone I'm kind of intrigued in tonight at 3,500. Obviously, if we get news that Jokic isn't playing and DeMarcus Cousins is playing, I mean, it would just make so much more sense to use Cousins at this particular price range at this position. But the Wizards, to their credit, I don't know if they made the right decision, but they have made the decision on their center rotation. And at one point they were kind of giving everyone headaches with this 3-center unit. They benched Daniel Gafford. They say they want to give Thomas Bryant some run as the starting center in this lineup. And if that equates to anything close to 25 minutes tonight, I think Bryant hasn't been in his best form since he's come back from this injury, but for his career, he's proven across his per 36 numbers that he's a very, viable NBA center. So I think in an up-tempo matchup at this cheap a price point, he's a pretty interesting name if some of the other value center plays don't end up coming through.
And the Bucks defensively have not been all that great the last week or so. Their points per game allowed are, 136 to Denver, 108 to the Knicks, 115 to the Cavs, 127 to the Kings.
And again, it's partly a product of just an up-tempo offense. I mean, there are so many more possessions in a Bucks game than your standard NBA game. And I don't think Bryant's going to have a massive performance by any means, but I do think he can outperform that salary given the environment tonight.
Where else you looking, Matt Meiselman? What do you think?
So quick thought on that game.
Sure.
I think Thomas Bryant is a good fantasy call. I think he's a significantly worse real life player than Daniel Gafford and Montrezl Harrell.
Definitely.
Right. So the conversation about what to bet for this game is different than the DFS conversation. I think Gary and I agree on that. I think Bryant makes sense to play in lineups, but I actually like the Bucks laying 11 points. I think they've been underachieving recently.
Juiced, minus 115.
Well, it's a little less good, but I still think it's all right.
Just making note. That's all. Yep.
Yeah. I guess maybe it's on the move a little bit, but they kind
of oscillating between 11 and a half and 11 all afternoon.
They got beat by Nikola Jokic very badly. 136 points, but sometimes Jokic is just going to do that to people. The Kings game you mentioned, Giannis didn't play that game. In general, the Bucks are going to give up a lot of points. They played at a pretty fast pace. They're just, their games are generally high scoring. So I think Beal being out is not being accounted for enough. And I'm not really sure how Thomas Bryant is able to stop Giannis when he's driving down the middle. There should not be a lot of defensive resistance coming from the Wizards defense. So that game, I'm leaning Milwaukee, even though they're pretty big favorites. The other injury news that we got is that Brandon Ingram's a game time decision. And there's so much else going on that guys like Devontae Graham and Nickeil Alexander-Walker are very likely to go overlooked if Ingram doesn't play.
Even Josh Hart, I feel like not a lot of people probably remember Josh Hart got ruled out for this game.
Right. That's so much less important once, I think it was a little before Curry got ruled out. So that just gets totally wiped off the radar for most people. If you take Hart and Ingram off this team, then I think Graham and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who are both priced in the same range as Jordan Poole and Spencer Dinwiddie and all these other guys, they make for viable pivots too. This is a good matchup. They're playing the Pistons. You can't really have much better of a matchup. And I think it's also possible we see Jonas Valanciunas or Javonte Graham get ruled out closer to the game. Neither is on the injury report, but they did play a close game in Cleveland last night. To my eye, it was a physical game. It was very, very low scoring. J-Val has been sitting a lot of back-to-backs. So even though there's been no mention of him yet, I think it's at least keeping an eye on that. Like, make sure he's out there for warm-ups. So he could have some kind of flare-up, and then we get Jackson Hayes or Willie Hernan-Gomez. There's a lot that could still happen from this Pelicans team. Yeah, like that game, it's just two teams that most people don't want to watch. And maybe that has an impact on DFS ownership. So I'm just kind of keeping an eye out there. And then the other situation, so injury-wise, it's not much of a DFS concern, but I think it's a really big sports betting concern, and that's the DeAndre Ayton and Jay Crowder news. So the DFS prices are just too high, I think, for Bismack Biyombo and the rest of the Suns' supplementary players, because Ayton and Crowder have been out for so long already that there's just nothing that's that interesting from the Suns. Yeah, it's not that interesting to play those guys at this point. Biyombo's 5,500. I mean, considering the value on the slate, you can't do that. But betting wise, like, I think Ayton is a lot better than Biyombo. I mean, it's weird to me that Bismack Biyombo has moved ahead of Jalen Smith and now JaVale McGee, who maybe McGee's not 100% because he was out a little while. The fact that Biyombo's playing ahead of these guys, like, I thought the Suns were a smart team. Maybe they're giving their regulars some time off to play fewer minutes because Biyombo has been out of the league for most of the season. So they're just letting him soak up minutes while these guys get healthier. But the difference in what the spread should be between if Ayton plays and Biyombo plays, I think is really substantial. So to me, the fair line with Ayton playing is somewhere around Nets plus 4 or 5 only. And if you put Ayton on the court, I think it gets up to 8 or 9. Like, I think there's that big of a gap because I think Ayton is that much of an upgrade over Biyombo. And then Jay Crowder is good too. It's just the Suns have more players that can do what Jay Crowder does. They have Cameron Johnson healthy. They have McCall Bridges healthy. They don't have Cameron Payne or Landry Shamet. Like, this could potentially be a pretty shorthanded team. So Crowder actually matters a little more than normal. But I think Ayton is the major impact here just because Biyombo is playing 30 minutes a night. If you give all those minutes to Ayton, that's a huge difference on the game. So I like the Nets actually if Ayton's out, and I like the Suns if Ayton's in. Like, he's not Jokic level, don't get me wrong, but I do think he moves the line 2+ points in either direction.
But hold on a second. Would you assume at Nets plus 6 that they're assuming he plays?
I think they're assuming 50-50. I think that's set at a midpoint where the line.
Okay.
I mean, it's Ayton plus Crowder, so it's a little more nuanced because let's say Crowder's in, but Ayton's not. Maybe the line just stays at 6. And if Ayton's in, but Crowder's not, maybe it, 6.5, 7, something like that. Like, I don't think it'll move much if we only get one of those two guys. But if both are in or both are out, I think we see it move pretty substantially one way or the other because that line seems to be priced for them to be true 50-50 calls. At least to my eye, that's kind of what it seems, where we don't know if they're going to play or not.
And what was the latest on Ayton as it pertains to the injury? So he was upgraded with the ankle to questionable.
Yeah, he was initially ruled out, upgraded around 2 p.m. Eastern time this afternoon to questionable. Has missed 13 of their last 17 games, I think, at this point. So even if he is active, I would assume he's under some sort of minutes restriction. But,
right
to Matt's point, if you're only having to replace the 25 to 30 minutes that Bismack Biyombo is playing anyway, it would be such a massive upgrade. One other thing, injury-wise, that I think speaks to
one last thought before Gary goes. So Matt, what would you urge folks to take the Nets now? Because say he does get ruled out, you're not getting a better number. Because if he does play, to Gary's point, it could just be it's going to be managed because of being back from injury.
The truth of how I look at it is, if you're going to sit in front of your computer and stare at it all night, you can wait for the news and make the bet.
We're not encouraging people to be you, Matt. Okay, like
why not?
We understand you're. I know that's why I made the joke.
When the right answer is be quick to react to the news,
right?
It's hard to give the wrong answer.
Yeah, like I don't think there's a strong.
Yeah, everybody, if you want to bet the Nets tonight, just be like me. That's.
It's not that hard. I mean, you just have to not have a life of any kind, doing anything else, and just do this.
Sorry, I keep cutting you off. Go ahead.
So no, if the question is, I have to make the bet now, right? Like, I'm going to lose, my phone's going to cut off power in 20 minutes. I have to bet right now. Which side of this game do you like? I don't necessarily like either side because this line really, to me, is right in the middle of a 50-50 call where I do not have a lean as far as if Ayton and or Crowder are playing. I just don't know. In the Jokic case, I think I could give more of a lean. Like my hunch is he's out, and I think there's more merit to just taking the Wolves, especially because the way I look at it, odds makers have the line shifted towards him being in. Like we're only going to see a 2-point move or so if Jokic is in, and we're going to see like a 7-point move, maybe not quite that much, but you know what I mean? We're going to see more of a move for him being ruled out than we will for him being ruled in. With the Ayton and Crowder situation, I think it's equal on both sides. Like you can flip a coin and decide which way you think the line would move more given the news. So to me, Denver, Minnesota is just much more clear, and I can give a concrete answer there. And with the Brooklyn Phoenix game, the only thing concrete I have is if you want to bet this game, you probably have to pay pretty close attention. Unfortunately, this is a 10 p.m. Eastern game too, so we may not know this for quite some time.
Okay, Gary, and you had something else you wanted to add on the injury front.
Oh, I was just going to say, just because the initial question even being what injuries are we sort of overlooking? And obviously injuries can be one of two things. They can be absences or they can be returns.
Right.
And to Matt's point, where no one just watches or wants to talk about the Pistons at all. And some people might even think Jeremy Grant doesn't play for the Pistons because he's been involved in so many trade rumors. How could you even know what team he's on at this point? But Jeremy Grant's going to play tonight. And I would say with the utmost certainty, he's going to be capped at, I would think 25 minutes, maybe even 20. It's been a while since we've seen this guy on a basketball court.
December 10th.
December 10th. Yep.
Yeah. Before you go on there, I just want to say I follow NBA injury news very, very closely. I had no idea Jeremy Grant was playing tonight.
There you go. That's the thing.
So if that's any indication as far as if other people will be aware of this, I had no idea.
I mean, the fact that these injury reports that you get like late Sunday, and with the Pistons too, I believe they've got 2 games since they've last played. So they've got some weird stuff going on with the timing of when they released that injury report. But yeah, Jeremy Grant's back. So I don't think obviously that Grant is going to be impactful in any way in his own capacity for DFS, but I do think it's an interesting conversation around Cade Cunningham because Cunningham is maybe the most volatile DFS asset that exists in the league. He is someone who is capable of both putting up 60 DraftKings points on any given night or 15 DraftKings points because he is that bad a shooter. More often than not, he has his occasional.
I mean, the last 2 games tell you everything you need to know, right? Look at them, or at Orlando and Cleveland.
But I would say his minutes have at least started to solidify. He was someone who was maybe playing. I mean, he was slowly working his way back from that initial foot injury, obviously, but he was someone who was probably playing around 32 to 34 minutes when it came to mid-December. He's now upwards to like 36, 37 minutes on average the past couple of weeks, which for me is more than enough for Cunningham because I think Cunningham is someone who is volume, like that's the entirety of his appeal is volume. So if you're giving him more minutes, he will take more shots, collect more potential assists, grab more rebounds. This is a good matchup. Second night of a back-to-back against the Pelicans. He's only $8,100, which again, for someone who has 60 DraftKings point upside is a pretty low salary. It's just interesting. I don't know how much Jeremy Grant is going to eat into that volume. And I think Grant is someone who, likes to be the number one option in that offense. He likes to have plays run through him. He likes to even run on the pick and roll occasionally. So I just don't know how much of an impact Grant is going to have tonight specifically. Again, I don't think he's going to play that many minutes.
Here you go. There's going to be an update momentarily.
Yep, no restrictions for Jeremy Grant.
Yeah, there you go. So now you can add that into here.
So I would just say at this point, I almost don't think I can play Cade Cunningham tonight.
That just happened? That just came out.
Yeah, right now they're saying no restrictions for Jeremy Grant or Kelly Olynyk. So some guys that are going to shoot.
That's another thing too, is Olynyk. I mean, not someone who we often talk about as like this elite NBA scorer, but his usage rate since he's come back for the Pistons has been massive. They are feeding him shots. So again, if both of those two players are back in the fold, and speaking to the article that I wrote 18 hours ago, I had Cade Cunningham listed as someone who I liked in this spot against the Pelicans. I would now say I do not like him.
Then again, I mean, I would strongly consider Kelly Olynyk tonight because he'll be out for revenge. he'll take it out on the Pelicans, but Tom Brady did not mention Olynyk in his retirement post because if you recall, Olynyk was in the Hamptons with the Celtics trying to recruit Kevin Durant to the Celtics, and it was Olynyk and Brady that were together. And I think Olynyk is really upset that Brady didn't mention him in his 8-slide Instagram post. Didn't
have that one written down. Although I
didn't either.
Olynyk is a British Columbia Lions fan, not really a New England Patriots fan. So
yeah,
do with that what you will.
He's just a Brady guy, you know. I think he's upset about that. So Olynyk might go off because Brady did not put him in his retirement post. So, all right. What else we got? Anything else here? Some player props, other bets we like here on the board. 7 games tonight.
Yeah, actually. So back to that Denver game.
Sure.
If you're someone who is watching the Jokic situation and trying to make a bet as it happens, be careful with Aaron Gordon and Will Barton because those lines are priced already. This is part of the reason why I don't think Jokic is playing. The Aaron Gordon and Will Barton props are already set for where they would be if Jokic was out. Aaron Gordon normally has over-unders of something like 12.5 or 13.5 points. We've got him at 17.5 tonight. There's no world where he would be that if Jokic were healthy. Maybe these two go up slightly more if Jokic is out, but they're basically set at a spot where we're expecting Jokic to not play. Like the under on both of these, I think, is unbelievably good value. More so for Gordon. I think Barton is less affected by Jokic. They both are affected to a large extent, but I think Gordon even larger than Barton. So under 17.5 points on Aaron Gordon, I think is a really good bet if Jokic winds up playing, because then you just have less for everyone. But the assist props too, that might not be a spot most people would look at. When Jokic plays, he always has the ball. And the assist numbers to me also look like they've been inflated for Gordon and for Barton and for Monty Morris based on Jokic not being there. So like 5.5 assists, Will Barton juice to the over. Like that's not a line we're ever going to see in a game where Jokic is active. So I would just be cautious here because I know it's a common strategy for people. You see a guy gets ruled out, we're going to go bet all the props on the guys on his team. These are ready for that already. So the real player prop value from this game, I think, is if Jokic does play, you get the under on like all of these things for these supplemental Nuggets players.
Yeah, and you can tell with Gordon, right, minus 160. And to your point about the points, he's at plus money at plus 120 to score over 17.5 points. By the way, the DraftKings Sportsbook just made aware on Twitter that they are honoring the payouts of Nikola Jokic's triple-double from Sunday night's game following the NBA stat correction. That's good.
Really? He got an extra rebound out of that?
I guess so, but they followed suit.
Right? That was the game against the Pistons. He finished with like 20 rebounds, but only 9 assists. Something like that.
Yeah.
You gave him an extra assist. Well,
yep.
That's good news.
So the DK Sportsbook is on that.
Yeah, people love to bet Jokic triple doubles. That'll be a lot of happy people.
I can't imagine that's up for tonight, right? Because of the concern if he's playing or not.
Yeah. I mean, it would be voided if he's out anyway, but yeah, there's just, I guess, if he's announced in with enough time before the game starts, we'll see those lines come. They'll show up within probably 20 minutes after we find out that he's in, if he's in. I'm really curious to see what DeMarcus Cousins props look like if Jokic is out and Cousins plays, because minutes are very uncertain for a guy like Cousins. He's been thrown out of games for technicals. He fouls a lot. But if he plays 30 minutes, like we may see a line that's priced for his average, let's say. So Cousins' average game in this scenario could be like 11 points and 9 rebounds. But like him going for 20 and 20, if he plays most of the game, that's also potentially a thing that he could do too. There's massive variance with Cousins, basically what I'm saying. So if there's some kind of alternate line or prop or something like that where you can bet Cousins to have a really big game once that shows up. We saw this with Drummond last night, right? Like Drummond is pretty similar in terms of like, you don't know how many minutes he's going to be out there for. He's always fouling, all of that. But the potential for a massive game is definitely there if the team's starting center isn't playing. So I'm curious just to see what that'll look like if Jokic is out and Cousins is in.
If we have questions from the Twitch chat, also the YouTube chat, please, we'll take them for these next couple of minutes and hopefully help you, guide you through these 7 games on the slate tonight. Again, it's a very interesting way. They are staggered. You get the Phoenix-Brooklyn game as the nightcap, and that game is on national TV. Any other value? Because I know we've talked a lot about Cousins. We talked about. I'm drawing a blank on who else we discussed. Oh, we talked about a handful of Warriors as far as values with all those guys out tonight. Any other value plays that might be being overlooked, Gary, and that we should touch on?
Yeah, I mean, if we would just want to go through a couple of these here. I mean, again, I think most people are going to draw from Golden State, obviously. I think Washington will kind of find their way in after that, just considering there's no Beal, and we kind of get a sense of what those rotations feel like. One guy who I did write up, and I still feel relatively confident in, and it's a tier we've talked a lot about so far, which makes it interesting, because that 5K range for guards is packed tonight. Gary Trent Jr. at $5,800. I mean, at this point, 4 consecutive games with at least 30 points. He's taken at least 22 shots, I believe, 21 shots in each of his last 4 games.
Yep.
I mean, I don't want to say this is something that's going to stay, but again, if there's been a cardinal rule of DFS in 2021-22, it's that Nick Nurse cares not for the minutes restrictions that some coaches do. I mean, he's basically every joke we made about Tom Thibodeau from Nick the Nurse early 2012, 2013 Bulls applies to the Raptors right now. I actually believe Pascal Siakam played, I think it was 560 minutes in the month of January. It was the first time the discrepancy between a player on one team and the next closest player on another team had been that wide since Jimmy Butler in 2015. So again, Tom Thibodeau-esque here, but if Gary Trent Jr. is going to have a 25 to 27% usage rate, playing 40 minutes a night, and just basically has the freedom to take any shot that he wants, he's not a big contributor in the secondary categories, but the minutes volume is just unprecedented. And I don't think it's changing. We've seen Miami and Toronto play a couple times now in the past 2 weeks. I think this is going to be a relatively close game script.
Yeah.
It's reflected in the spread as well. I just think Trent is someone who, with the amount of value around him because of circumstances that have changed by injury, maybe Trent goes a little bit under the radar, considering the Raptors really don't have any injury issues right now. It's just they happen to utilize their starters as if their entire bench was hurt.
And both teams are on the second night of a back-to-back. Is that correct? Because last night Atlanta had their win streak snapped. So the Raptors are home after playing in Atlanta, and Miami played Boston last night, and they got blown out. So you'd think you're going to get a pretty good effort from Miami
Jimmy
tonight.
Didn't play in that game, so obviously Jimmy has fresh legs.
Yeah. I think that's a much more important thing that people tend to realize with the back-to-backs is we don't often remember, like the Butler case, I think is a little more obvious because Butler is a very big name player and we pay attention to what Jimmy Butler is doing. But like the Pelicans tonight, for example, on the tail end of a back-to-back, but Brandon Ingram didn't play last night. Like if we're pricing in back-to-back and saying the team's going to be tired, we have to remember who actually was playing. The Warriors are on the second night of a back-to-back. The group of Warriors playing in this game, aside from Jordan Poole and Jonathan Kuminga, basically didn't see the floor last night. I think
Moody played
Chris Chioza might have played.
Jordan Poole, 26 minutes. Yeah.
Right. And that was probably the team leader of tonight's roster. That was the guy who played the most minutes last night.
Looney, 26. Yeah.
So the guys that would have been the most tired, like Curry and Klay Thompson and Andrew Wiggins, those guys aren't even playing tonight. It's not even really like a back-to-back for the team.
True.
So betting wise too, like, this is an important thing to consider because really, like, I think home court in the NBA can be worth 2 or 3 points most of the time. And then I think playing a back-to-back, depending on the nature of the back-to-back, can be an additional 2 to 3 points on top of that. Depending where you're traveling to, right? Like if you're going from the southwest part of the country to the northeast part of the country, like that's a little more of a burden. But if the guys that are playing the second night didn't play the first night, then we need to account for that too. So in the case of the Heat, like Butler is ready and he's gonna be the only person in this game who didn't play yesterday. To Garen's point, like I think that does make Jimmy Butler a little more compelling of a DFS play because we know he has fresh legs and we know that everyone else doesn't, especially given the tendencies of Nick Nurse playing his starters for just obscene numbers of minutes. And then the Raptors Saturday night played right? These teams played each other Saturday night and went to three overtimes?
Yes.
It was the first game in NBA history a team had all 5 starters play at least 55 minutes.
That is an insane stat.
No, actually, I know we got to wrap up quickly here, but I am surprised the Heat are not favored tonight, especially considering that the Raptors' home court advantage, quote unquote, is pretty indiscernible right now.
Yeah, I do have this can be for the next show, but flying to Toronto is hard, even if playing in front of Toronto's fans is not that hard because there aren't any.
No fans.
None, right? Zippo?
I think they're now allowed technically to have 500, but I don't think there will be any fans. 3 weeks.
Are you going to be one of the 500 tonight?
No, I'm here, Glash.
And there's a mascot that's no longer allowed to sit under the basket and make noises at people while they shoot free throws. You know, the Devin Booker rule. Is that what we're calling that one?
Sad mascots, yeah.
You could, well, I know you're here now, but you could go. The game's not until 7:40.
No, they didn't invite me, unfortunately.
Oh.
And Gary has to sit around and wait for all of the news to break.
Yeah, I got to wait for Nikola Jokic news to break. DeAndre Ayton.
Okay. Well, we'll work on that. We'll have to talk to Chirag and get you a DK Live credential.
I would appreciate that.
Game credential to cover. And you know what? Chirag, real quick, last thought. Chirag will do it, right, Meiselman? Because Chirag has a future on Raptors win total. So he would
actually.
Yeah, absolutely. He does. He has the over.
I can't remember where that landed.
No, he took it live during the season, right? Matt,
that may be true. I know the number was around 36 or so. So it was it was either a preseason or early season number. Yeah. So he's a Raptors fan. He should want you there to help the team win.
See, and work that in. Okay. We'll work on that. This is what we do when people come on the show and hang out when Chirag can't make it, because Matt always shows up. I show up. By the way, tomorrow, the slate is at same time, about 5 o'clock after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim. It's Golf Guy Wednesday tomorrow, I've been told by the host of tomorrow's slate. That would be Emerson Latzia. So he can be the only one who works that show tomorrow. So Golf Guy Wednesday featuring him, Jeff Ulrich, and Reed Fowler. Someone here maybe will be a little bitter that Emerson couldn't switch shifts with me on Monday because he can't not work the Wednesday shift. So look forward to that, and also look forward to the sweat tomorrow at 11 a.m. on Twitch, YouTube, and on Twitter. Thanks for watching, everybody, and best of luck with your bets and DFS on the NBA side. Good night.